Good evening. We once again begin with where our thoughts are all day and all night, that Achenu b'nei Yisrael hanesunim batzor v'ashivya ha'omdim ben b'yom u'ven b'yabosha ha'mokum yirachem aleihem v'yotzihem mitzar l'avacha u'me'afel li'oru mishibud l'gula. The Eibush is a health, and that we should see the Yeshua, that the Klal Yisrael's b'sakona, not only in Eretz Yisrael, but there's an onslaught of terrible, false, mean-spirited sinner against Klal Yisrael, and that we should see the Geula Shalema that will solve all of the problems. I also want to acknowledge Torah Anytime for the magnificent job in disseminating Torah Lishma worldwide. Now, Parshas Vayeira, the first segment is about the Malachim coming, and they were fulfilling a wish that Avram Avinu had, that he needed. It was like his bread and butter. It was like his air to have Orchim on Shabbos. And we're going to touch on a couple items in regard to that. For instance, in the beginning, the pasuk says, "Vayisa eina vayar," that he picked up his eyes and he saw. V'hinei shaloisha anoshim nitzavim olav vayar vayoretz likrosam. It says a second time vayar, and the meforshim in that one pasuk twice the word vayar. Why did it have to say twice? And one of the meforshim very strikingly points out that it is a message to Klal Yisrael, Kol Yemei Chayehem, because we are inspired. We see a scene of a Rosh Yeshiva or a tzaddik speaking. We are uplifted. We are imbued with a tremendous dynamic of wanting to do what the speech is asking for. And then we come a week or two later, and we already are having diminished desire and thirst for what just a week or two before we said, oh, absolutely, and we are thrilled to participate or to do. And in unison, the echo of dissent sets in. Aren't you too tired? Aren't you too busy? Leave it for somebody else. But Avram Avinu, Vayar, he was thrust into an oilam of ecstasy with the first Vayar, that he now had Orchim, and he was going to be able to do the mitzvah of Hachnasas Orchim with a tremendous thirst. So the pasuk later says again, Vayar, to tell you that not like so many who after a little while, that there is a decline in the enthusiasm, but he had the same enthusiasm an hour later as he did the minute that he first saw them. and he became aware of the fact that out on that hot day, the third day of his Milah, and out in the desert with the sun shining, that with his pain, with his age, with everything, that same desire and tremendous response that he had at the very first few minutes, it did not wane. It was still there in full force. And we have to dedicate ourselves to learning and to doing and to our davening and to do so much for others. But a week later and a month later, we should not lose that burning desire. Now, we know that there was a tremendous response by Avram Avinu. He went out, and when they finally did come in, he prepared 3 tongues for them to eat. Now, anyone who's aware of the size of a tongue, he could have fed 30 people with 1 tongue. But he wanted it to be above and beyond. And as Rashi notes, he even prepared mustard, chardal, for them to have with the tongue as they ate. And he told Sarah, shlosh se'im kemach soles, which was a ton of the finest flour. There were just 3. But when it came to the water, it says, Yukach no ma'at mayim. He said, take a little bit of water and give it to them. Now, if he was so magnanimous throughout the entire time in preparing so much, an abundance of everything, why when it came to water, does it say, Yukach no ma'at, a little bit? So some of the Meforshim say that the water that he was referring to was not water to drink. It was water to wash their feet. The pasuk says, "V'rachatzu raglechem," because he was afraid that there was some dust, some earth on the feet of these 3 that they served as avodah zorah. That's what some Meforshim say. But others say that the water was for drinking, and it was a message of Hachnasas Orchim to the entire Yiddish folk, the Jewish people, everlasting in their existence. That when you are confronted with the opportunity of having a guest, and you meet the person right at Shalashuda's time, and you're thinking, how could I invite him to my house? I don't have any special foods in the house. I didn't prepare. And what am I going to do? Give him some tuna salad and some egg salad? So the Meforshim say exactly that if your overwhelming attitude is to uplift the spirit of someone who may be hungry, and maybe he's hungry for company, maybe he's hungry for atmosphere, don't hesitate, because what you do or don't have. After all, whatever you serve, if you encompass the guest in an atmosphere of unbelievable friendship, love, laughter, uplifting his spirits, and enjoying every minute, then what you did or didn't put on the table is not going to make any difference. And that's why it says, Yukach na ma'at mayim, even if you take a little bit of water, a symbol of the type of food that you will put out, don't hesitate from welcoming and bringing a guest into your house, even if it was unannounced or unexpected. But don't lose the opportunity. Now, we know that Avram Avinu served, as the pasuk says, that he served Vayikach chema v'cholov, he put milk and butter, and it says uven habakar, and he put fleishiks. So when we teach children in the 3rd grade, we say that he gave them milchiks first, and then he served sometime later. Some people wait 10 minutes, some people wait an hour. The Ribnitzer Rebbe waited 24 hours. 12 hours. He waited between fleishiks and milchiks. But that's how we tell and explain to the children that there was milchiks and fleishiks. But in the Sifrei Kabbalah it says that Avram Avinu went to the flock to take an animal, and he wasn't happy with the quality of what he saw, that it be heavy and juicy and very delectable, that it should be so tasty. So it says that we know that Avram Avinu wrote the Sefer HaYetzirah. And that's the Sefer of creation. That's how the Maralmi Prague made a goylem, that there was a desperate need at the time. Yiddish communities, Jewish communities, were devastated by the onslaught of anti-Semitism. And the lives of many Jews in many communities were at risk. So the Maral, who had, of course, an abundance of Ruach HaKodesh, saw what was doing in the other communities, and he dispatched his goylem. It was a robot, but it was able to act as a human being, and it pulled the Yid out of the sakana by either killing the terrorist who was after the Yid, or there was something going on in a town against Yidden, that this powerful robot was able, the goylem, to come in and to save the hour and the situation. So it says, and where did the Maral get it from? He got it from the Sefer HaYetzirah, the Sefer that Avram Avinu wrote. So Avram Avinu knew the secrets, and today you could buy the Sefer HaYetzirah. It's all in code, so you wouldn't understand it. See, Rufei Shemes and the statements made there, because it's in code, and unless you're either with Ruach HaKodesh or into Kabbalah with Tahara and Kedusha all of your life, you can't understand what's there. But Avram Avinu knew exactly. So it says that he created on the spot an animal, like an animal flew down from heaven. A miraculous cow suddenly appeared. And the only halacha the Mefarshim say of basar b'chol, of having dairy with meat, which is forbidden, is with meat that is normal and natural. That means it was born from a mother. But if something flew down from heaven, that does not have the halacha of basar b'chol, which means that they could have eaten that meat. And the raya is from the pasuk, because it says uven habakar asher asa, that he made. It doesn't say uven habakar asher heichen, which he prepared, or uven habakar asher shochat, that he slaughtered, that he prepared for them to eat. but it says uven abakar asher osa, which he made, because he made it on the spot, and that's how those mekubolim explain how he had fleishiks and milchiks, because those halachas don't appear from about the miraculous cow that flies down from heaven. Now, we said before about the two vayars that a person should not lose sight and lose his spontaneous warmth. And they bring a raya that it says that it took 3 days for Avram Avinu to get to the Akedah. Now, the Rashi says, Kafza lo haderech, that the actual trip to go to the Akedah took 3 days, but if it was Kafza lo haderech, that he had supernatural power in his trip and it flew by, what took a day took 10 minutes, so why did it have to take 3 days? So the Meforshim explain, because since it is the backbone and the cementing factor of Klal Yisrael in their bakoshas, let's say on Rosh Hashanah, we're talking about the Akedah all the time. And we ask our Kodesh Baruch Hu to remember that moment as a schus for us. Now, but it took 3 days to get there, because the Goyim would have stood up and said, oh, Klal Yisrael, you're depending so much for your existence on the fact that there was once the Akedah. If it would have taken only an hour, then they would have said, it was on the spot. It was spontaneous. That's why he did the Akedah. But if he would have had time to think about it, he never would have done it. So therefore it took longer. It took 3 days to get there to the Akedah, so that he would be able to implant and instill into the daily calendar. We say Karbanos every day, the Akedah. We talk about in the Tochacha, we come back that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will suddenly remember the actual Maisim of the Avos, and what Avram did, and what Yitzchak did, and what Yaakov did, and one of the key elements is the Akedah. And because it took so long, he had time to think very well before he got there to actually do the Akedah. Now, we know that the Gemara asks a question, and it was asked to Amoraim, to Tanoim by their Talmidim, Bameh herachta yomim. Why were you zoicha to live so long? And the Gemara says that a few were asked that question, and one said, Me oilam lo asisi kapandria. I never took a shortcut in shul. I never used the shul that there was a long way around the shul, or there was a shortcut by going into the shul and using the shul as the shortcut. So that Amora said, I never used the shul as any type of shortcut. That's why I was zoicha tarichas yomim. Another one of the Amoraim answered and said, Me'olam, I never called a friend, another Tana or an Amora, by a nickname. And the Gemara in Bava Metzia even says someone who calls somebody a nickname, instead of being mazkir, his Shem Kodesh that he was given either by his bris or by a girl, let's say by a mishaberach on Shabbos or on weekday, but a mishaberach by the Sefer Torah, that the Gemara there says, Ein lo chelak liolam haba, that it's a serious thing. He was called with Ruach HaKodesh a name, and you take that name and you turn it into some sort of circus or to a joke by calling them all their lives some sort of nickname which has nothing to do with their holy Lashon Kodesh name that they possess. So, one of the Mefarshim points out that the common thread of all the answers of everybody who was asked that question, why were you zoicha to longevity, to live so long, is they all began their answer with the word me'olam. Never did I do this, or never did I do that. But they all started in their response with the word me'olam, which underscores that Yiddishkeit needs constancy and to be consistent. We can't have one day, a day of enthusiasm, and we start learning an extra Mishnah each and every day, and then we fall back. We stop doing what we were makabel. We stop the hislavas, we stop the hergish of what we're doing. But me'olam, if you do something good, and you do something in your daily lives or your schedule that's worthy of the time, so it has to be me'olam. Incorporate it without fail. Now, somebody could be sick one day, but they said me'olam, meaning never. And never means never. If it came out of the mouth of an Amoira or a Tana, the word me'olam was kodesh, kadoshim in its fullest meaning, or they wouldn't have said the word me'olam. So we have to know that there is a thread of consistency that we have to incorporate into our lives. Now, you know that the story of Sodom came up right after this, because one of the Malachim came to tell Sarah that she's going to have a baby, and one was to tell Sarah that she's going to have a baby also was to save Lot, and one was to destroy Sodom, and one was for Avram. So they came, and one of them said to Avram that V'hine vein l'sara ishtecha, that your wife is going to give birth to a child, to a son. And he said, Ashuv elecha ka'es chaya u'l'sara vein, that I am going to return to you, and Sarah will have a son. Now, there is a sefer called the Sefer HaPardes, which was written by Rashi. Rashi wrote a sefer called Sefer HaPardes. And he says there, he asked a question. The Malach said he's coming back, and Sarah's going to have a baby boy. We never find that the Malach came back. Never came back. But if the Malach said, Ashuv elecha, I'm coming back, he had to have come back. Answers Rashi, not in Rashi, in his Sefer HaPardes, that when Avram went to the Akedah and he took the Machelas to begin the Shechita of Yitzchak, So a malach came and said, Al tishlach yodecha el anar v'al tas lo me'uma. Don't go through with it. This was a test for you. And that says, Sefer HaPardes, Rashi, that's 38 years after he said it, he came back, because Yitzchak by the Akedah was 37. And it was a year till she gave birth. So it was 38 years. He came and he was the malach that said, Al tishlach yodecha el anar v'al tas lo me'uma, that he was able to effectuate by telling Avram Avinu not to do the shechita, that Sarah Imenu had a bain. And that's what he meant then, that I'm going to come back and then Ula Sarah vain, because Sarah, he won't be shechted, but he'll remain as a son to Sarah. Now, I want to tell you and share with you something that the Ritva, who you know was a Talmud of the Rashba and lived around 900 years ago. He says that after this story of the Akedah, Yitzchak went up to Shemayim and lived there for 2 years. And he came back down because he had a neshama that couldn't have children. That's why he didn't marry yet, and he was already 38 years old. But he went up for 2 years, and the pasuk says the pasuk tells us that he came down. Vayehi Yitzchak ben Arboim shana bekachto es Rivka. He was 40 years old. And the Ritva substantiates and marshals support to this statement that Yitzchak went up and lived 2 years in Shemayim, that he proves his point by making a cheshbon. And the cheshbon is how old was Avram Avinu when he gave birth to Yitzchak? He was 100 years old. How old was Yitzchak when he gave birth to Yaakov and Esav? The pasuk says, "V'Yitzchak ben shishim shana beledes osam," that he was 60 years old when he gave birth to the boys. So if Yitzchak was 60, how old was Avram Avinu? He was 160, because he himself was 100 when Yitzchak was born. And when Yitzchak had the 2 boys, he was 60, so Avram Avinu had to have been 160. Now we know that when it says Vayigdalu in Parshas Toldos, Vayigdalu HaNaorim, that the boys grew up, says the Medrash, it means that it was their bar mitzvah. Vayigdalu, they became gedolim. But the Medrash also tells us, and the Gemara discusses it, that Avram Avinu on that day died. He was nifter. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu had Rachmanis that Avram Avinu shouldn't see how Yitzchak went out l'tarbos ra, that he went out and became so bad with his killing and stealing and everything he was doing. So according to that, Avram, if he was 100 when he gave birth, and he was 160 when the twins were born, when the twins turned bar mitzvah, 13 years later, he was only 173, sorry. That's their bar mitzvah. And we know that Avram Avinu was 175 when he was nifter. So how could we have this discrepancy? Says the Ritva, because there were 2 years that Yitzchak was in Shemayim. And it doesn't count the years that you live in Shemayim. It only counts the years you live here in Olam Hazeh. So Yitzchak really wasn't 60 when he gave birth. He was 62. And the 13 years later, Avram Avinu was indeed 175. And Yitzchak at that point was 75. Now, interestingly, there is a question with Sodom. I mean, it would look to someone, chas v'sholom, like HaKadosh Baruch Hu was teasing Avram. Because Avram Avinu found out, Hashem told him, because he said, "Hamachas ani me Avram me asher ani osa," that from what I'm about to do, destroy Sodom and the 4 other cities, am I going to conceal and hide this from Avram, who is my trusted, beloved? So he told him, and right away Avram answered and said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if there are 50 in this city, are you going to go and destroy an entire city? If there are 50 who are righteous or deserve to be saved. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no, I won't destroy. Then Avram Avinu came back and said, how about if there's 45? How about if there's 40? How about if there's 30 or 20 or 10? And to every question, HaKadosh Baruch Hu answered and said, I will not destroy if there are 45 or 40 or 30 or 20 or 10. But we know, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu of course knew, that at the end they'd be destroyed. So it looks in this Shakla V'Tarya and these Bakoshas almost as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu was teasing Avram. He knew they're going to all be destroyed and everything's going to be wiped out. So why did he egg him on to continue asking for this and for this and for... At the end, there wasn't one that was saved. But Meforshim say a very important yesod for us. Many times we daven for something and it doesn't happen. We're all saying Tillim, we're giving tzedakah, we're davening. And the next day the person dies. And someone may think, look at everything we were busy doing, davening and all of that. And at the end the person died, so it wasn't worth the whole effort. But Avram Avinu wanted to implant and instill into the essence of Klal Yisrael the koyach of tefillah. Because when a person davens sincerely, and there is an absolute altruism of his tefillah, that it's not to show off, it's not to impress, it's not... But he is davening sincerely to help save the person, even if the person dies. So it would look like the tefillah was for nothing. It's not for nothing. It goes to the file cabinet, and maybe his son or grandson's going to be b'sakona, and it's that tefillah that they pull out, and that it makes the day in saving this person. So we have to realize that we have to do. There was once a very big asken who was trying to do something for Klal Yisrael. And at the end, it failed. So one of the Rosh Yeshiva wrote this asken a letter and said, we have a Kabbalah for Reb Chaim Volozhiner, who lived 200 years ago. He was the Talmud Muvik of the Gra, who lived from 1727 to 1797. And Reb Chaim Volozhiner once said that a person is oisek b'tzorchei tzibur, or involves himself in an issue, a communal issue, he has to remember 3 rules. Firstly, he's not allowed to get angry. Because when you're dealing with tzibur, there's 25 opinions, and there's 25 from left field and right, and you have to be a codifier, and you have to be a very diplomatic, articulate leader to be able to swim the currents and all the challenges of dealing with tzibur. So he says you're not allowed to get angry. And if you remember, I told you the Rambam Shita, that the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't go into Eretz Yisrael was not because he hit the rock, the Rambam holds. It was because he said, Shimu Noha Moirim. He got angry and he said, you rebels, talking to Klal Yisrael, watch what's going to happen now. He was fed up. He was frustrated. So the Reb Chaim Volozhiner said, you are never as a leader allowed to get angry. The second thing he said is you're never allowed to get tired. Because working the crowd and caring to lift the mission of tzibur and the issues that come up, you can get worn out and bogged down from just the sheer weight, mentally and physically, of dealing with tzibur. So he said, you're not allowed to get tired. And the third thing that he said, and you're not allowed to want victory. Now, what he meant by that was that a person could work on something l'shem shamayim for 10 years, and it doesn't happen, or it comes to a halt. He had a mission that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him the koyach, and he built a shul, and Baruch Hashem got mispalalim. And if after a number of years the shul closed down because the section got weaker and more difficult, he cannot say, oh, you see, it was a waste. I tried and it never happened. And with that, this Rosh Yeshiva said to this asken, because take a look at the Akedah. Avram Avinu was put to the test. Some say it was the 10th and the final. Others say it was only the 9th, and that next week by Chayasara, where Sari Yimenu was Nifter, that says Rabbeinu Yoina, who was a Rishon, that was the final test, because to go through the Akedah and come home to the news that his wife passed away, he could have turned and said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, after all I've gone through, and here I was ready to shecht my son, and this is what I come home to the levaya of my wife? But he didn't have even one such machshava. So the Rabbeinu Yoina says that was even a bigger test than the Akedah, and that's the final and 10th Nisoyan. But most of the world holds that the Akedah was the final and the 10th of the Nisyonis. So the Rosh Yeshiva said, we are so proud of having the Akedah, Zechor Akedas Yitzchak, that we say it throughout Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, we say it every day in Karbanos, the Akedah, but it didn't happen. He was supposed to shecht his son, Yitzchak, and it never happened. So that's what he said in trying to direct to the path of how Yidden have to live their lives. We don't have to have the final say to have success. We have to do the right thing, and we have to make sure that our maisa of the right thing is accompanied with all the dibur and all the machshava and everything that we have to do to bolster the power of what we did. But the end result does not mean that we have to do something with the end result of what we call success. So the Akedah was very successful, even though it never happened. There was no shechita. And that's how we have to be able to direct our goals and push ourselves in that type of direction that our each and every day becomes a lot more meaningful as we do it and as we live our lives. Now, after the story of Sodom, and it was destroyed, the Malachim ushered Lot to get out. And he came, he believed he lived in the house of Avram Avinu, and as I told you last week, he was a tzaddik, as the Medrash says, his whole life till he went with Avram to Mitzrayim, and then he fell into the 42nd Street activity and behavior, and he never got out of it. So as he was being ushered out, because Avram Avinu was Hashem planned to destroy 5 cities. One of them was Mitzor. Now, Lot walking out was supposed to go elsewhere, but he turned to the 2 angels and he said, I would like to go live in Mitzor. I think that that's where I can survive and I could live. And the Malachim said, okay, you don't want Mitzor to be destroyed? We're not destroying Mitzor. And you can go there. Halo Mitzor hi usachi nafshi. Now, just before, Avram Avinu was begging HaKadosh Baruch Hu, let's save something. And a big 0 was the response. Yet we find by Lot, he asked for a city, and they gave it to him on the spot. Avram got nothing, and he got Mitzor. So Meforshim answer and say a very striking answer, a shocking answer. Lot put his life on the line when the Malachim came to him. Lot put his life on the line. He was ready, even the Meshuggah, to go take his 2 daughters and said, do whatever you want with them, but just leave these guests alone. But he put his life on, and he was hospitable, and he almost paid with his life. They wanted to kill him. So there's such a thing called Hakoras Hatov. And Lot put himself on the line and did everything and anything above and beyond for these Malachim. When he came with the request, please don't destroy Mitzar, they couldn't destroy it. Because of Hakoras Hatov. Avram Avinu was the one who asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu to save Sodom and Amorah, and was twisting and turning in every which way, and he got nothing. Because there was no, he asked Hashem, he didn't ask the angels, that he served so selflessly with such Mesiras Nefesh, such chesed, but they didn't owe him. He didn't ask them. He asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu to save Sodom. So there was no component of the Hakoras Hatov. He did a beautiful thing, and it became the backbone and the structure of chesed for every Yiddish shtup, every Jewish home, and for everything that would take place for Klal Yisrael. But there was not an equal component of Hakoras Hatov like he had, like Lot had. With the angels, with the Malachim. Now, I want to say to you that the Gemara says that Kol HaKoveya Makom L'Tfilaso Elokei Avram Be'ezro, that if anyone is Koveya a Makom where he davens, and he davens in the same place, he is able to establish that permanence. He etches into the essence of everything that this is my seat for davening, and his whole life, he goes through life like that, with that. And the Mefarshim explain that you see the difference between Bilam and Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu, when he was coming back, went back to the same place that he davened, and that's on that. The Gemara says, Kol HaKoveya Makom L'Tfilaso. So, HaKadosh Baruch Hu then is standing at his side to be there, to help him, to do for him, and that established place. But as the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, that Bilam, every time he failed, he told Balak, let's go to a different place. And from there, we'll bring a korban and I will try to curse Klal Yisrael. Because that's Bilam. He's not Koveya a Makom L'Tfilaso. And he pays at the end with lack of success, not only in his tefillah, but his whole life takes a turn to the negative side. So we have to establish, there was once a story of an aguna that after the chasna, the husband disappeared, and not right after, in other words, like a year or two, they were husband and wife, and then he disappeared. And she went for many years, for 25 years as an aguna. She didn't have a get. And they came to the Chofetz Chaim. And they told the Chofetz Chaim that the man showed up at the door of the wife and said, I am your husband who disappeared. And they started to question him. And he knew every answer to every single question. because obviously he was either the husband, and he shared, as they bring the story, intimate things that only a husband and a wife would know, or he was told by the real husband all these details. So they came to the Chofetz Chaim and said, what do we do? Is it the husband or not? So the Chofetz Chaim told them to take the man into the local shul and ask him where was his seat that he davened every day. And of course, he came into the shul and he couldn't identify the place. Because when you etch into the essence of the time that you daven 3 times a day, that there is that consistency of place, like we keep speaking about consistency, that it propels the person into the realm of greater and greater. He grows with his mitzvahs and ma'asim tovim, with his tefillah. But that only happens when it's consistent. And that begins with the makom that you are koveya. And that's why the Gemara says on this about Avram, when he came back in our parsha, that he went back to daven in the same place that he did when he was going on his way. Because kol ha-koveya makom l'tfilaso, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is be'ezro, he's there steadfast as a friend and as an ally. So we hope that our tefillas, they should be niskabel. We should have a geula and a Yeshua, and that no life should be further sacrificed by these savage Rishoim, and that we should be able as a Klal Yisrael to live with harchava and to live with menuchas hanefesh in our avodas hakodesh.